Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. A peaceful Wyoming morning, a jogger, a gun, and a neighbor with a grudge. When Chief of Police Cassidy Lowry is accused of being a threat on her own land, a quiet feud ignites into full-blown war. Power, paranoia, and justice collide. Welcome to the HOA battle no one saw coming. It was early morning, the Wyoming air still crisp enough to see your breath, and the only sound around the ranch was the steady rhythm of boots hitting dirt. My wife, Cassidy, had always been a morning runner. Even when we were both still working for the feds, she'd be out there before sunrise, pounding gravel while most people were still trying to find the snooze button. Retirement hadn't changed that, and neither had her promotion. She was off duty, wearing her usual running tights, a long-sleeve hoodie, ball cap, and, of course, her sidearm. Cassidy never left the house without it. It wasn't about paranoia. It was discipline, habit, and in this state, fully within her rights. The Glock on her hip was in a high-ride belt holster, visible but holstered properly, safety engaged. Wyoming was open carry, and she carried like a damn professional. Hell, she used to train half the state's SWAT instructors. I was inside the barn working on the expansion plans for the North Range when I heard the voice. A shrill, jagged screech like a hawk with a stick up its ass. "You, stop right there! Put that gun down!" I walked out onto the porch, squinting toward the cedar line that bordered our property and the HOA development next door, Silver Pines Ridge. That place had the charm of a gated community and the personality of a tax audit. All white fencing, artificial landscaping, and matching mailboxes that looked like tiny marble mausoleums. The folks in there weren't my type, and their queen bee. Even worse. Sure enough, standing 10 paces inside her precious gravel lane was Karen Beauchamp. Platinum bob, pressed khakis, and the permanent expression of someone who smelled something foul and assumed it was you. She was pointing, not at me, but at Cassidy, who had just reached the bend where our trail looped near the old livestock fence. Cassidy slowed to a stop, hands relaxed at her sides, not even winded. Her body language was calm. Karen's? Not so much. Cassidy called out, "Can I help you with something?" Karen didn't answer the question. She practically barked. "You're armed. You are approaching a residential gate with a weapon. That is a threat to the community." Cassidy raised an eyebrow. "I'm on my own land." Karen stepped forward as if proximity could compensate for the nonsense coming out of her mouth. "You're adjacent to our HOA. That makes this a public safety issue. You are brandishing." "I'm jogging," Cassidy replied, deadpan, "and I'm holstered." "You're a stranger with a gun near our kids," Karen shrieked. Cassidy sighed, pulled back her windbreaker just a bit so the badge clipped to her waistband could glint in the sun. "Name's Cassidy Lowry, Chief of Police, county-wide jurisdiction." It was like someone poured ice water down Karen's spine. Her mouth twitched like she couldn't decide whether to scream or faint. But of course she regrouped. People like her don't retreat. They escalate. "This isn't about your title," she sneered. "This is about recklessness. You're making people feel unsafe. That's enough for a police response." Cassidy didn't reply. She just turned back and resumed her jog like nothing happened. I saw the tension in her shoulders, though, not from fear, from restraint. She could have dropped Karen with one verbal command, but that wasn't how Cassidy worked. She let people hang themselves with their own rope. Karen stormed off toward the HOA gate, yanking out her phone and spitting venom into it like it owed her money. I knew that look. She was calling dispatch. Hell, she might have even gone straight to the municipal substation, the one outside Cassidy's command. She was probably ranting about an armed threat near the community perimeter while using phrases like potential terrorism and female assailant. Theatrical, panicky, dangerous. A mix Cassidy and I had dealt with in too many courtrooms. I stayed outside, leaning on the railing, watching the tree line. It took just under 15 minutes. 2 patrol units from the nearby township showed up, one unmarked Explorer and one black and white with lights off. They parked on the gravel near the gate, 2 uniformed deputies and a plainclothes guy stepping out, probably their field supervisor. I could hear radio chatter behind them, but I stayed put until Cassidy looped back around and walked up the drive like she'd just finished a relaxing jog, because, in her mind, she had. One of the deputies stepped forward, hand resting on his vest. "Ma'am, we received a report of a woman with a firearm near the HOA entrance." Cassidy gave him a tight smile. "Yes, that would be me. And I believe I outrank you." She pulled her badge and ID out of the runner's pouch she wore, strapped to her arm, and held it out. The field supervisor leaned in, read the credentials, and his expression shifted from wary to sheepish. "Well, hell. Chief Lowry," he said. "Sorry for the confusion." "No problem," Cassidy replied, "though I'd appreciate it if your dispatch reminded callers that carrying a firearm isn't a crime in this state, especially on private land." That's when Karen reappeared, stomping across the gravel with all the grace of a furious goose. "There she is," she screeched. "That's the woman. She was armed. She approached my property." Cassidy folded her arms. "We've already clarified that I'm the chief of police, and I was jogging on my own land." Karen's eyes bulged. "I don't care who you are. That badge doesn't make you God. You're intimidating people with your presence." "That's emotional coercion." The supervisor's mouth twitched. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to calm down. The chief is within her rights." Karen snapped. "She should be disarmed immediately." "I demand it," one of the deputies muttered to the other, loud enough for me to catch it. "That's the 5th time this month she's called in over nothing. Last week it was a lawn flamingo she thought was a drone." Cassidy didn't flinch. She just looked Karen straight in the eye and said, "You've had your say. Now let these officers do their job and stop wasting their time." Karen was vibrating with rage, but she had no more cards to play. Not today. She turned and stormed back through her pristine gate, muttering something about lawsuits and congressional letters. I looked at Cassidy, who just shook her head and said, "I need a shower." And I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of it. The next few days passed in relative quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that hums like an electric fence. Something's there, just waiting. Cassidy went back to work after her short leave, and I resumed overseeing a new shipment of steel targets for the range. We both kept moving like nothing happened, but we weren't naive. Karen Beauchamp didn't strike me as the type to let go. She struck me as the type who polished grudges like family silver. That Thursday evening, just as the sun was dropping behind the hills and throwing long golden shadows across our property, I spotted a stack of envelopes clipped to our front gate. HOA letterhead, pale beige paper, heavy stock, real fancy stuff, the kind of thing that screams, "I want to sound official even when I'm full of shit." I brought them inside and laid them out on the kitchen island. Each one addressed not just to us, but to other landowners whose lots bordered Silver Pines Ridge. Cassidy leaned over my shoulder, towel still around her neck from a post-shift shower, and frowned. "She's going wide," she muttered. Inside was a single page. Bold letters up top. Proposal for a residential safety buffer zone. The language was syrupy, all about communal peace, public well-being, sightline security, but the intent was crystal clear. The HOA was proposing a new policy that would prohibit visible firearms from being carried or displayed on any property bordering the Silver Pines Ridge community. According to the document, these properties contribute to the shared visual environment and therefore had a responsibility to meet community safety expectations. Cassidy chuckled dryly. "So if I so much as mow the lawn with my gun on, she's calling in the HOA cavalry." "Apparently," I said, "and she's also implying she can regulate private land outside her HOA's jurisdiction." Cassidy pulled out her phone and took pictures. "I'm sending this to the county clerk. It's unenforceable, but the overreach alone is worth documenting." But that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, I woke to an email from the County Oversight Council. Subject line, "Notice of citizen concern filed against county official." It was a formal acknowledgement that a complaint had been lodged against Cassidy. An anonymous party had accused her of abusing her position to intimidate residents, citing brandished weaponry and behavior unbecoming a public servant. Cassidy read it without blinking. She really thinks this is going to stick. I wasn't so calm. I'd dealt with this kind of warfare before, only with more tattoos and less perfume. I knew what it looked like when someone tried to slow burn a target to collapse, not in a single explosion, but with 100 tiny stupid paper cuts. Karen was trying to box Cassidy into a corner, using procedure, perception, bureaucracy. Cassidy's badge made her untouchable by regular HOA complaints, so now Karen was trying to create political friction, probably hoping some weak-spined official would ask Cassidy to keep a lower profile or not create tension. It was cowardly, calculated, and typical. Cassidy reached for the coffee pot, poured herself a mug, and said, "She's not just going after me, she's setting precedent." If she pulls this off, anyone who lives next to an HOA could be told how to behave. That afternoon, while Cassidy was at a meeting with the sheriff's office, I decided to pay a visit to a few other landowners who got the same envelope we did. My neighbor Hank, who ran a small equestrian training facility, laughed so hard he almost dropped his Copenhagen. "Hell no, I ain't signing this," he said, waving the letter. "Karen tried to get me fined last year 'cause my horses farted too loud. Let her come tell me I can't carry on my own dirt." At the next property, I met an older widow named Eleanor who'd inherited her late husband's hunting cabin. She looked nervous. She said if I didn't agree, the HOA would consider access modifications, whatever that means, Eleanor told me. "I don't want trouble." I nodded, jaw tightening. That's how they did it. Not just with rules, but with intimidation disguised as suggestion. I spent the rest of the day documenting. I scanned every letter. I recorded witness statements on video. I compiled every camera angle from the original gun threat incident. Then I called in a favor. A friend of mine from my ATF days, now working cybercrime at the state level, agreed to cross-check some names. Turns out, 3 people who submitted support letters for Karen's buffer zone weren't just HOA members. They were listed on the HOA council, and 2 of them hadn't paid dues in over 2 years. One address turned out to be an Airbnb. Things were starting to stink, and not just HOA stink, but federal oversight stink. By sundown, I had everything stored on a secured drive, triple backed up and mirrored to cloud storage. I wasn't going to let Cassidy be dragged into some farce tribunal just because Karen didn't like the idea of someone with a badge and a sidearm not bowing to her yard gnome empire. Cassidy came home late, tossed her folder on the table, and leaned against the fridge. She called a town meeting. Saturday, HOA invited the county council. She wants to present her firearm visibility ordinance in front of a public forum. I raised an eyebrow. She wants a show trial. Cassidy nodded. Well, she's getting one. Saturday came wrapped in sun glare and tension. The HOA had commandeered the community center, a sterile little building near the gated entrance of Silver Pines Ridge, all fake stucco and flower beds designed by committee. I parked just off the main drive, outside their territory, of course. Cassidy pulled up behind me in her cruiser, still in uniform. She hadn't planned to attend, but after the county council's chair confirmed he'd be present, she changed her mind. "They want official presence," she'd said. "I'll give them official." We walked in together, me in jeans and a collared shirt, Cassidy in full gear, minus the body armor. The room was already packed. HOA board members up front behind folding tables draped with logo cloths, residents filling rows of plastic chairs, and there, dead center, in her power blouse and blood-red lipstick, stood Karen Beauchamp. She saw us and stiffened like someone had slipped ice down her spine. Her expression twitched, then settled into something smug, like she'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror and was ready for her grand entrance. I scanned the crowd. Plenty of homeowners, a few council reps in the back, and even a couple reporters with notebooks out. So that's how she wanted to play it. Public pressure, spectacle, implied consensus. Karen tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this emergency HOA assembly. Today's topic concerns a threat, not hypothetical, not political, but physical. Right here, bordering our homes." She gestured to a slide projector. An image appeared on the screen behind her. A zoomed-in shot of Cassidy jogging on our land, sidearm visible on her hip. Another slide, a satellite image with a red dotted line marking our border, overlaid with the HOA's walking trail nearby. "As you can see," Karen continued, "our children and seniors are routinely exposed to the presence of visible weapons from non-member landowners. We believe this undermines the values and safety expectations of Silver Pines Ridge." She clicked again. A draft resolution appeared on screen, full of dense legalese, but the gist was clear. Any visible firearms on adjacent private property, observable from public-facing HOA pathways, would be considered a violation of community safety standards. The document requested that the county enforce the rule via sightline compliance extensions. The gall of it made my teeth ache. Cassidy stepped forward. "Mind if I address the room?" Karen blinked, surprised, clearly not expecting her target to speak. "This is an HOA-led. The county council is here," Cassidy said flatly. "So am I. As chief of police, I'd like to clarify a few things." Karen hesitated, glanced at the council reps, then forced a smile. "Of course." Cassidy turned to the audience. Her voice was even, firm. "Wyoming is an open carry state. On private property, owners have full legal right to carry firearms, visible or not. There is no statute limiting this based on the sensitivities of neighboring HOAs. A murmur swept through the crowd. A few people nodded. One older man in the back even clapped once before stopping himself. Cassidy continued. I was jogging on my own land within my rights and received an aggressive confrontation. That's not just improper, it's harassment. And I'd strongly advise this HOA to stop issuing unauthorized compliance requests to properties beyond your jurisdiction. Karen stepped forward, fire in her eyes. You're politicizing law enforcement. You're intimidating residents with your badge and your weapon. No, Cassidy said calmly. I'm standing up to your misuse of authority. And speaking of authority, that's when I took the floor. I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the podium. Since we're discussing safety, let's talk transparency. I've compiled some documents that may interest the county representatives present. Karen's expression twitched. I opened the folder and read aloud. Unauthorized use of HOA funds for personal landscaping projects on non-HOA property. Payments to a private security firm not listed in the approved budget. Multiple board members, 2 of them related to Ms. Beauchamp. Not current on dues, yet retaining full voting rights. Karen was already speaking over me. This is slander. You have no proof. I held up printed screenshots, all from public filings, receipts, and resident testimonies, including copies of complaints from your own members about financial opacity. A county representative, a lean guy in his 50s named Raul Dillard, raised his hand. We'll be taking those copies for review. Karen's mask began to slip. This meeting is about firearms. Raul shook his head. Not anymore, ma'am, Cassidy added. We're also opening a harassment inquiry based on the false complaint you filed against a county officer. Fabricated allegations are a criminal matter. The room, once filled with whispers and murmurs, had gone silent. Karen's face had turned the color of old paper. Someone in the back muttered, "About damn time." She turned toward the audience, tried to regain control. You people are letting outsiders dictate how we live. But it was too late. People weren't with her anymore. Eyes that once followed her now looked away. HOA members pulled out phones, not to support her, but to take notes, pictures, videos. Cassidy leaned toward me and said under her breath, "She just lost them." Karen left the podium a moment later without a word. The meeting didn't so much end as dissolve. County reps gathered paperwork. HOA members clustered in small groups, whispering, some arguing. I saw Hank there, hands on his hips, shaking his head at the entire mess. Raul from the council pulled us aside and said, "We'll be following up, privately, soon." We drove home without speaking much. The whole thing felt like a punch thrown underwater, slow, inevitable, just heavy enough to leave a bruise. Cassidy poured herself a drink when we got inside. I started checking the motion alerts on our fence cams. 2 pings already. Karen wasn't done. After the HOA meeting, things got quiet again. Too quiet. Cassidy called it the eye of the idiot storm. I called it a setup. We both knew Karen wasn't the type to crawl away. She was the type to double down and probably bring a flamethrower to a marshmallow roast if it meant saving face. 3 days later, our security camera caught a man pacing just beyond our fence line, in the brush near the South Trail. He wasn't dressed like a hiker, black jeans, sneakers too clean, a ball cap pulled low. He kept glancing toward our house like he was waiting for something. Cassidy and I watched the feed in silence. Then we saw it. He pulled a phone, propped it up on a rock, paced back again, and started filming. I narrowed my eyes. This guy isn't lost. On the video, he shouted toward the camera loud enough to carry. "You're threatening me. Put the gun down. This is abuse of power." But there was no one else there. Not Cassidy, not me, just him, yelling into empty space. Cassidy hit pause. "You think what I think." I nodded. He's staging a fake confrontation. For the record. Sure enough, later that night, a video surfaced online. Blurry, shaky, captioned, "Female cop threatens unarmed civilian near HOA border, caught on tape." The man in the video, now labeled concerned resident, screamed about intimidation, claimed he was approached by an armed woman in uniform, and that he feared for his life. The video made rounds in certain corners of social media, mostly Facebook groups with names like Justice for the Overlooked and Citizens Against Government Bullying. Most of the comments were nonsense, but a few locals recognized the man in the clip. His name was Calvin Dross, not a resident, not even from the county. He'd been arrested in Montana last year for impersonating an official in a land dispute. Twice. Cassidy pulled up his mugshot. Karen hired this guy. I called Hank. He confirmed he saw a stranger meeting with Karen near the HOA clubhouse 2 nights earlier. Cassidy filed a formal report with the district attorney's office, attaching a side-by-side of our security footage and Calvin's performance art. It took all of 20 minutes to confirm the video was staged, but Karen wasn't done. That weekend, a group of about 15 people showed up at our property line with signs. Most were older, a few teenagers with cell phones. One woman wore a whistle around her neck and blew it every time Cassidy so much as stepped onto the porch. The signs read things like, "No military zone near homes," "Disarm the police," and one particularly creative, "Badge God." Cassidy sipped coffee while watching from the deck. Creative. Poor grammar, but creative. I wasn't laughing. They're trying to create noise, baiting us. We called the sheriff's office. They came quickly, took down names, asked the crowd to disperse. Nobody was arrested, but several were warned. Cassidy made a point of not engaging. She didn't so much as look at them. That alone probably made Karen's eye twitch. Later that night, we got a call from a reporter at the state-level news channel. Apparently, Karen had reached out with exclusive footage and a whistleblower account claiming Cassidy was running a privatized, militarized compound. The reporter, to her credit, had done her homework. "I looked into your record, Chief," she said. "You ran SWAT programs in 3 states. I don't think you're a lunatic, but Karen's making noise." Cassidy exhaled slowly. "Let her make it. I'm done playing defense." The next morning, we met with the assistant district attorney. Cassidy laid out everything: the fake video, the pattern of harassment, the public endangerment through false reports. Then I handed over my own file. A week's worth of digging had turned up something more serious. 3 of Karen's resident voters on recent HOA resolutions, they didn't live in Silver Pines Ridge. One was listed at an address belonging to a property management firm. Another, a vacant lot with no home at all. Voting fraud, financial manipulation, and now false accusations. The ADA leaned back in her chair and said, "We're past HOA mischief. This is criminal now. Give me 48 hours. Cassidy gave a single nod. "You'll have everything you need." The call came just after noon while I was cleaning one of the training bays at the range. Cassidy answered on speaker. It was the assistant district attorney, Sylvia Marin. "We've issued a formal request for financial records from Silver Pines Ridge HOA," she said. Karen hasn't responded. Our investigator tried to contact her personally. She refused access and claimed executive privilege. Cassidy raised an eyebrow. "She's not the governor or the Pope." Sylvia snorted. "No, but she just might think she is." Here's the real update. We're moving forward with a grand jury hearing. We'll be serving a subpoena by the end of the week. I stood up, wiped my hands on a rag. "That'll light a fire." "It already has," Sylvia said. "I just got word Karen filed a civil complaint this morning. Against you, Mr. Lowry." I blinked. "What for?" "Hostile intimidation, illegal surveillance, and, get this, emotional distress resulting from paramilitary exposure. She's claiming your training facility is causing her psychological trauma." Cassidy burst out laughing. "She's suing because she's scared of targets shaped like circles." I wasn't laughing. I knew Karen. If she was trying civil court now, it meant she was scrambling, and scrambling people make desperate moves. 2 days later, the desperation arrived. Cassidy and I were just finishing breakfast when I heard a crunch outside. Not the usual gravel shift, but something heavier. I stepped out onto the porch and saw a white moving truck parked at the edge of our southern boundary. 3 people in reflective vests were unloading boxes. One man was rolling out a cheap plastic welcome mat. I walked down to the fence. A woman with a clipboard turned toward me. "Sir, can you step back? We're setting up temporary housing as per emergency compliance protocols." I stared at her. "What the hell are you talking about?" She showed me the clipboard. At the top, Silver Pines Ridge Satellite Housing Initiative. Below that, a printed map completely fabricated, with our parcel listed as Designated Expansion Zone. I snapped a photo of it, then said flatly, "This land is not HOA property. It's not zoned for housing, and you're trespassing." Cassidy was already behind me, speaking into her radio. The workers froze when she said the words "criminal trespass in progress" and "possible civil fraud." Within 15 minutes, 2 sheriff deputies arrived. The truck was impounded. The workers, who turned out to be a temp crew hired from a Craigslist-style site, gave statements. None of them had ever heard of Karen. They'd been paid in cash by a man who said he worked for a city expansion project. Meanwhile, Cassidy pulled footage from the wildlife camera near that stretch of fence. It showed Karen the night before, walking the perimeter, placing wooden stakes in the ground. That was enough. The district attorney's office obtained a warrant within hours. By sundown, a joint task team of financial crimes and public integrity investigators arrived at the Silver Pines Ridge Community Center with a stack of files and a camera crew from Channel 7 not far behind. Karen was hosting a wine and vision night, her version of a town hall, when the agents entered. "You're Karen Beauchamp?" one of them asked. She didn't even have time to answer. The lead investigator handed her the warrant. "You're under investigation for financial fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to file false claims, and abuse of HOA authority. We'll also need access to all HOA financial and meeting records immediately." Cassidy and I didn't attend the show. We didn't need to. We were watching it live. They led her out in handcuffs, still protesting, her voice high and trembling. "This is political. I own this community." But no one was listening anymore. HOA members stood on the sidewalks, arms crossed, faces hard. The illusion had cracked, and with it, the hold she had over the neighborhood. The morning after Karen's arrest, I woke up to an inbox overflowing with messages. Most were short. Some were just links. Every local news outlet from here to Jackson had picked up the story. HOA president arrested on corruption charges. Grand jury to review allegations of HOA fraud. Wyoming community rocked by scandal. Cassidy sipped her coffee with a smirk. Well, I guess she finally made the front page. I'd barely finished breakfast when my phone rang again. This time it was Hank, our friend from the sheriff's office. "She's lawyering up," he said. "Real aggressive team from Cheyenne. But the feds are circling now. Someone tipped off the office of Inspector General." That got my attention. "You're saying it's going federal?" "Yep." The misuse of community funds crossed state lines. One of the vendors she used for landscaping kicked back a portion into an out-of-state LLC. Wire frauds now on the table. Cassidy muttered, "Damn, she really went full mafia." Later that afternoon, Cassidy was summoned for an in-camera interview with the county board, not as a defendant, but as a witness and official complainant. The hearing was sealed, but I waited outside the chamber, pacing like a dog locked out of its own yard. An hour later, she stepped out, stone-faced but calm. "They're recommending dissolution of the HOA," she said. "Effective immediately, pending emergency vote. They've already assigned a provisional trustee to take over operations in the interim." The speed of it shocked me, but it made sense. The council didn't want to go down with her. 2 days later, we were invited formally to speak at the Emergency Community Assembly of Silver Pines Ridge. It was surreal walking through that overly manicured entrance with the iron sign and fake colonial lanterns. The crowd gathered in the clubhouse looked tense, some defensive, some furious, but many looked just tired. The provisional trustee, a tall woman named Emery Locke, opened the meeting. "We are not here to assign blame. That will be handled by the courts. But we are here to discuss what happens next." Then she introduced Cassidy. I watched my wife, cool as a desert morning, step up in front of the crowd that once called her a threat, a danger, an invader. She didn't gloat. She spoke briefly, laying out what had happened, what her role was, and how the abuses were brought to light. And then she did something even more surprising. She invited the community to visit our training facility. "No guns required," she said. "No politics either, just neighbors, coffee, and safety classes for those who want them." Silence, then a few nods, then a few hands raised. One elderly man said, "I've lived here 15 years, and I never knew we weren't even allowed to walk over there." Cassidy smiled. "You're allowed. The gate's never been locked." Emery took the floor again. "We'll put the dissolution vote to the members now. We require a 2/3 majority." By the end of the night, 80% of HOA members had voted in favor. Silver Pines Ridge HOA was effectively over, just like that. Except, not just like that. There were still investigations pending, charges to be filed. During discovery, it was revealed that 2 other HOA board members had been signing off on fraudulent checks for years. One had diverted community maintenance funds to renovate her vacation home. Another had used the HOA's insurance plan to cover a relative's business. Now they were under indictment too. Cassidy came home with a thin folder in her hands that night. She handed it to me. Karen's official deposition, she said. Want to guess what her defense is? I raised an eyebrow. Temporary insanity? Cassidy shook her head. She claims she was targeted by a militant couple trying to dismantle suburban order, that she acted under stress, fearing for the sanctity of the neighborhood. I laughed, hard. She's got a future in fiction. Too bad the judge isn't a fan. We should have known Karen wouldn't go quietly. Even after the HOA was dissolved, even as criminal charges piled higher than her topiary hedges, she was still scheming. I didn't realize how far she was willing to go until the morning I found the envelope duct taped to our mailbox. No postage, no return address, just my name, scrawled in an angry cursive that I recognized immediately. Inside were 3 printed photographs, all taken from a cheap drone by the look of them. Grainy, slightly tilted shots of Cassidy walking from the range to the house, one with her hand resting near her holstered weapon. The envelope also contained a single-page affidavit, unsigned, claiming that Cassidy Lowry verbally threatened a civilian neighbor while armed and in uniform. There was no name on the complaint, no contact info, just the vague title, Concerned. Citizen witness. Sloppy, desperate, and exactly the kind of thing Karen thought might scare someone into backing off. Cassidy looked at the photos and shook her head. She's trying to bait us into a mistake, or force a misconduct hearing. She wasn't wrong. That same afternoon, a county ethics board clerk called to notify Cassidy of a pending review. Someone had submitted an anonymous complaint with a copy of the photos alleging abuse of power and psychological intimidation of neighbors. The timing wasn't a coincidence, but what Karen hadn't counted on was how seriously Cassidy took transparency. She didn't try to bury it. She published a statement the next day, along with timestamps, unedited camera footage, and a clear explanation of the open carry legality in Wyoming. She even included screenshots of Karen's past public complaints and a forensic breakdown from the drone footage metadata, which showed it had been edited with inserted timestamps. 2 days later, the so-called witness was identified, a man with 3 prior fraud convictions, one of which included manufacturing evidence in a custody dispute. He'd been paid in cash by someone who preferred not to be named. Under pressure, he folded. I never even saw her draw the gun, he confessed on video. The lady didn't do anything. I was told it was for a community safety piece. That was the final nail. The county board dropped the complaint. The prosecutor added conspiracy to falsify evidence and witness tampering to Karen's growing charge list. But the real change didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened the following Saturday when Cassidy held an open workshop at the range. We expected maybe a dozen people. Instead, over 60 showed up, including former HOA members, 2 retired teachers, 3 teenage girls who wanted to learn self-defense, and a woman who simply said, "I never felt welcome under her." Cassidy ran the entire class herself, professional and calm. When she demonstrated basic defensive posture, she even joked, "Let's all agree not to surprise our neighbors with drones." The laughter was genuine. For the first time in months, the property felt like ours again, not just by deed, but by piece. Neighbors brought pie. Someone started a fire pit. Kids played cornhole in the backfield. No signs, no rules, just people being people. One man, I recognized him from past HOA meetings, approached me as the sun went down. "You know," he said, "for someone who is supposed to be a threat to our neighborhood, you've done more for it than anyone else I can remember." I nodded. "Funny how that works." He chuckled. "We're still working on Karen's landscaping, though. Might need a tactical burn." I smiled. "That can be arranged." 3 weeks later, the courthouse was packed. Not with protesters or press this time, just neighbors, former HOA residents, and a dozen people who'd been personally targeted by Karen over the years. The courtroom didn't buzz like some spectacle. It was quiet, like the end of a long illness. Karen arrived in a pressed blazer, her signature pearl earrings in place. But there was no smugness left. She looked thinner, paler, and finally stripped of that glassy sense of untouchability. Her lawyers moved briskly, no flashy speeches, no showboating. The charges read like a criminal justice syllabus: fraud, wire fraud, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, falsifying evidence, illegal surveillance, conspiracy, and misuse of public funds. A total of 22 counts, and this time she wasn't walking out. The judge, an old Navy JAG officer with a stare that could cut glass, didn't waste time. Karen had accepted a partial plea deal, but not for leniency. Just to avoid a federal trial, she pleaded guilty to 11 counts and the rest were rolled into sentencing. Her attorney tried to argue for community service and supervised release, citing her advanced age and long-standing civic contributions. The judge didn't flinch. "In my court," he said, "abusing your neighbors and your power while hiding behind the flag is not a mitigating factor. It's an aggravating one." He sentenced her to 10 years in a medium security facility, no parole for at least 6. The courtroom didn't cheer, it exhaled. 2 of her former board members were still under investigation. One had already flipped and provided damning internal emails where Karen referred to Cassidy as the gun witch. The court ordered a full forensic audit of HOA funds and issued a restitution package. Residents who'd been overcharged or targeted would receive compensation funded by liquidation of Karen's estate and seized HOA accounts. But the story didn't end in the courtroom. A month later, Cassidy stood at the state capitol steps, shaking hands with the governor, who presented her with a formal commendation for exceptional integrity and leadership under fire. She wasn't much for the spotlight, but I saw the small smile when he said, "Wyoming stands a little taller with officers like Chief Lowry." And then there was the land. With the HOA dissolved, the Silver Pines Ridge residents voted to create a non-binding community council, one that had zero enforcement power and operated only by consensus. No fines, no patrols, just neighbors talking. And they invited Cassidy to be a liaison, not as a law enforcer, but as a neighbor. We agreed, not because we wanted control, but because it was time for trust. And the range, we expanded it. Turned part of our land into an official county training and outreach facility, offering civilian safety classes, situational awareness courses, and, to Cassidy's particular delight, courses specifically for women and seniors. It wasn't about firearms. It was about confidence. One afternoon, as I was fixing the roof over the classroom awning, I saw an older couple wandering up the gravel path. They looked hesitant. "Is this the open carry school?" the woman asked. Cassidy walked out from the shade in jeans and boots, badge off-duty but posture still sharp. "It's a community range," she said. "You're welcome." I looked out over the hill where once HOA bylaws tried to stretch like barbed wire. Now it was just land, wind, and the sound of people learning they didn't have to be afraid. Cassidy and I added one final touch to the main gate. A handmade wooden sign burned with our emblem. "Open carry allowed, respect required, and don't bother calling the police. She already lives here."